Awesome. Does it say it's recording. Sorry. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the House Bill 2316 Advisory Group. We are getting started today, calling the meeting to order at 9:07 on January 23rd. Today, we wanted to update you on a couple of timelines. So we've been meeting monthly at this point, trying to get the advisory group stood up. But I want to give you all an outline of the work that we're doing and kind of how long we're expecting it to take place. Can everybody see the PowerPoint? Great.
Yes.
Here we go. So for the advisory group work timeline, we've done the kickoff meeting. Uh, this took the first 4 months, so from October through January. We did welcome, we did the initial recruitment of the members where we reached out to all. You all decided to participate voluntarily. Thank you. We've talked about the mandatory trainings in the second meeting. We are at this point where we're talking about the group charter and the application review. So we'll go into more details about that today. That's where we are. For the next couple months, we'll be talking about the solicitation. So the solicitation is the application that's going to go out to the public where they can apply for these funds. OHA is going to be doing a partner technical assistance session. So we put out the application, known as the RFGA, the request for grant application. And then we're going to do a technical assistance where we meet with anybody who wants to apply and we help them answer questions, or we help answer questions that they may have, filling out the application or maybe some attachments that they need to include as they send back. We want to make sure that the application is accessible to everybody. So instead of replying to people individually as on emails, we want to make sure we're answering the questions to the public in an equitable way. So we'll be talking about that the next few months. You all are going to actually get to see the application before it goes out. So we'll be talking about it here. Chris?
Yeah, just a quick question. So in the past, when this was housed at Oregon Housing and Community Services, the advisory group actually advised on what buckets money would be applied to. Have those decisions already been made and OHA did that unilaterally? Or how is that process going to play itself out?
Good question. So the House bill has outlined what buckets of money this advisory group will get to spend.
Yes, yeah. No, I know the House bill. We wrote it.
Yeah.
Uh, right. So I'm just wondering how that works in terms of what we did with that legislation is put the whole universe of what it could fund.
Oh,
And then through the advisory group process, what was happened to make sure that NOFAs went out for particular things, that advisory group helped provide advice as to how much of that pie should be sliced off into different buckets of different kind of things like crisis respite or residential or those kind of things. Will we be following a similar process, or again, is the agency making those decisions?
great question. Yes. The advisory group is going to be helping score the applications. So as the applications come in for community housing, crisis, everything you just mentioned, the advisory group here is going to help score them. They'll be making recommendations to behavioral health investments team. So our team ultimately we'll be making the decisions of where the contracts are going, but we will be leaning on the recommendations of this group to score the applications. Does
So
that
again, I'm not getting my answer or an answer to my question.
okay?
hmm
There is a
So,
pantheon of what these funds can be applied to.
Yeah.
Are you saying you're putting out a general application, you can apply for any of this, and you're asking us to score based on what we think should be a priority versus crisis respite versus residential versus something else? Or are these going to go out in discrete buckets? So there's a NOFA for notice of funding availability or whatever the acronym is that we're going to use that says here's $5 million set aside to develop crisis respite. If you would like to apply for that, here's the specific application for that. Can you describe a little more sort of how that process is going to work?
Sure. Apologies. It sounds like you're asking where we're trying to prioritize the spending or what we're trying to prioritize the spending for. So the governor's office has told us that they would like us to prioritize uh, residential treatment facilities and community housing projects. So while the House bill does outline the money could be used for crisis stabilization or other services, we primarily want to focus on the building or like getting projects over the finish line of increasing bed capacity.
Okay,
Does
that
that
and
answer the
that makes sense.
question?
So does that mean, again, forgive me for belaboring this, but I
That's
just want
fine.
to really understand because it
Yeah.
worked one way in the past. Again, we got legislation to hand this over to OHA and it's been sitting dormant and there hasn't been any outreach to us as the bill authors to figure out how has this worked in the past. In these buckets, so there's the residential plus bed study,
Mhm.
which I'm guessing that's what you're referencing in terms of why the governor is setting these priorities, because we're following the roadmap of that study. Within that study, there are discrete levels of housing that are all different. They're not the same thing. Will each one of those types of housing, so let's say it's licensed residential treatment homes and treatment facilities, will that have its own pool and its own specific application? Or is there going to be competition between someone saying applying for funds for community housing and that's going to be in a pool of applicants, including licensed residential? Or are these going to be separate application tracks? Does that make sense? Hopefully, I'm making sense.
Chris, this is Lisa. So this is let me just make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, and I'm going to try to break it down really simple. And this might be a question for our manager or our specific lead. Um, what I'm understanding you say at the beginning, because then I got lost, but what I'm understanding when you're talking about the bill and that certain different types of, oh gosh, I don't know what adjective to use, but there are different people of interest that might be able to dip into the bucket. Is that what you're asking us? Like, who's
I,
going to determine who is
that,
vi viable
yeah, that was
to?
part of my question. I think that
Yes.
got answered,
Okay.
which
Okay.
is the agency is going to follow the governor's priorities. That's based on the residential bed study that the public consulting group issued, and that makes
Okay.
sense. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that got answered. What hasn't been answered is there is a difference between supported housing, supportive housing,
Mm-hmm.
residential treatment homes, residential treatment facilities, secure residential treatment. In the past,
Right.
when OHA did, when I was involved in scoring applications, each one of those classifications had a tailored application, and those applications were scored against other like applications. And
Right.
the whole pot of money then was divided up, saying, okay, we're going to set aside. And again, I'm just pulling, talking off the top of my head. A
Mm-hmm.
priority is residential treatment homes. Of the pool of money available, we're going to set aside $10 million available for residential treatment homes. Here's the application process to access that money. There, boom. Another allocation of that money then would go, I don't know, residential treatment facilities. And there was a
Mm-hmm.
whole separate application process and a pool of money for that. I'm just trying to get a sense of the way it's being described right now. It sounds like a wide open process, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I'm understanding if that's
Yeah.
true.
Right. So that is a question that our manager will need to pipe in and answer, unless Layla, do you know specifically how to answer that question? I do not.
Yeah, I can speak to that.
Okay.
I'll say hello. LaDonna got a chance to join us, and I think we had another
We
partner,
have a hand raised.
Michael. Great. Oh, and we had have a hand raised. But let me try and summarize. The question is we want to have one application process. But I believe that the scoring is gonna help what's gonna help us divide like who gets the priority, whether it's a residential treatment facility center, whether it's a residential treatment house. The different types of facilities will be prioritized based off of, like you mentioned, the governor's priorities. And that could be through the scoring process, not through a separate application. Does that somewhat answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, it's not a satisfactory answer having done this for years and years. I mean, you're going to be pitting competition of different housing types against each other, and that does not seem prudent. What I'm hoping maybe is if you could email me separately who the manager is so we can,
She's
um,
here.
okay, because that has not how been OHA has done it in the past ever. And that's not how Housing and Community Services did it with this money, because I don't know how you score supportive housing against residential treatment. They're completely different levels of care, and yet they're both called out in the residential bed plus study. And then you're getting down into regional differences and regional priorities, which the study highlighted the different gaps. So I guess I would just encourage OHA to sort of put pools of money based on those priorities and let like applications score against like applications. I don't know how we as an advisory body, that's a heck of a responsibility to say, well, that region needs a residential treatment home, but instead we're going to pick supported housing instead, right? And that's a sort of an untenable position.
Yeah, I can step in here, Chris. I am the program manager for the Behavioral Health Investments team with OHA. And I'm sorry I arrived late. I was in a meeting and got detained. So I really apologize for that. So I did not hear what was presented that is raising concern. But I also stepped in front of someone who had their hand up. So if let's just kind of let whoever had their hand up go, and then let's circle back to this because you all are here for a reason, and especially Chris, you've got the expertise and passion around this that we want to hear.
I think this is Reverend Luke Walters, by the way. I think my question integrates pretty well with Chris's. So there's a lot of need around the state, and I believe that the residential beds plus study is going to determine what's the highest need, and it might be above our pay grade to be privy with that for that like rubric and template of determination, but I think that we should have it shared with us as much as possible, because I know that there are some communities that are in greater need now than others, and maybe some program types and security levels and stuff like that. So prioritizing our attention would be helpful. I do know that, I said early on that the PSRB community, the Psychiatric Security Review Board, those people that are clients under there have been neglected for a very, very, very long time. And so that's my interest, is making sure that that's a prioritized community, for instance. And what about like indigenous or diversity of ethnicities and stuff like that? What's the priorities? I think that would help us to know these things going into this. Thanks.
Yeah, and absolutely the residential plus facility study is released to the public. We'll just send it to this group at concluding after this meeting. We'll get that sent to you all, and I think that is a very good point because there is a 5-year recommended recommendations for expansion, and I think we should look at that. And to your point, Chris, I think that what we're going to want to do is take the residential plus study that is right now a kind of a North Star guiding point for us, and then determine what the need is, where it is, and that will drive the type of solicitation that we put out there. I think this solicitation is very unique in that and correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears to be intended for gap funding. And so that's going to be a unique, those are going to be unique projects. And so I think we're going to want to factor that into with that, what is it, 35% max, unless it's a rural project, which then could be fully funded. So
That's correct.
thank you.
Yeah, and then just highlighting too that, and again, I'm not saying this should be part of solicitation. It is also intended to help with some startup costs. So that may
Mhm.
be a factor you build into as well. I know with a lot of providers, we did that purposely because it's hard.
Okay.
Those first couple months are pretty hard for things to break even enough to even stay open.
And so, and that's really good point, because typically with our other funding streams or appropriations from the legislature, we typically build in 2 months of startup costs, but it sounds as though this could be an additional kind of buffer to get them.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an option. Like, again, I'm not saying it should happen, but we tried to build in some flexibility into this. If that is, in the agency's determination, would help bring in, applications and help projects. It's an option.
Mhm, mhm. That makes sense. Okay. Do you want to continue on?
Great. And I'll mention, and Dana's asking in the chat, sorry, Miss, when are we getting the solicitation to review and comment on? We're hoping to get that out to you all for next month's meeting. So you all are going to help us in this process, making sure we making sure that you're included, that your voices are included for the solicitation and also the scoring matrix. So we can make sure that we are going to get applications that were intended for the purpose of the House bill.
And so with the conversation that we just had, I'm just wondering, I know we want to get the solicitation out there, we want to get the funding out there, communities need it, but I am wondering if we want to take a step back and go a little more in depth about the type of housing and aligning it with the Res Plus study to ensure that we're coming in a way that that you all feel should be the priorities.
I I do think it would be helpful to actually understand the solicitation, especially if we're going to be scoring, and also if there are particularly with different uh, perspectives from kind of each of our lenses, also making sure that if we need to talk some things through before the solicitation goes out, that we do that so that we're not trying to resolve that on the back end. I think that would be a good idea.
I agree. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that we will go with what we've drafted thus far. We'll review that and then make the adjustments now that we have that window of time to do it. Does that feel good to everybody? Okay. Sorry, Dana, I didn't see your hand up.
No worries. Got to answer your questions. Yeah, I like where this is going, and just to call it out, like for good measure, while we're in like the thinking stages, um, it sounds like, yeah, some of this money can go to like supportive housing, community, like affordable housing with services for the priority populations. Um, and I know, and like the governor's office is talking a lot about, looking at what OHCS is doing with PSH, permanent supportive housing, and how to better align it for people with very high behavioral health needs, people exiting the state hospital. And so there's like that conversation going on. So I'm thinking we want to make sure like this work is like reaching those bigger outcomes of the governor's office, and like making sure that it can be really well, because like our partners are going to get creative with using OHCS resources, Metro resources to piece it all together. So I think we want to be mindful of how to really make sure this is like a leverageable resource if it is gap funding, especially.
Yeah.
Obviously, residential facilities, but is a different issue, and I can't really speak much about it. But the affordable housing piece, like definitely, we want to make it work with other dollars.
And if I can just respond to that, we had a lot of lessons learned, and the supportive housing, the PSH it's pretty complex with all of those funding streams and getting them to align. And it was a bumpy process, as you know. We had to meet with you about it. And so given the level of funding that we have here, and And with what is included in the Res Plus study and the governor's goals, I mean, I think this is the place for us to have this dialogue. I mean, I'm wondering if we should stick with the licensed and that's the way that we write the solicitation. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
I was just going to say, LaDonna, I think we're headed in the right direction. So your suggestion is good. I would, given the residential study, given the governor's priority, given we're, knee deep almost in the legislative session, it would be nice to hear from the agency. Okay, if you're going to divide this 20 million into buckets, give us a recommendation to at least work off of to say, and the rationale for that, like in this, like we're going to focus on a solicitation in XYZ region because XYZ, right?
Mhm.
And then let us respond to that and ask questions and see, and then bring that to a final conclusion.
Yes. Yeah, agreed. And I think that I'm just going to be really transparent. We need to do a little more of our own homework on our side of it. We're not quite there yet. So we'll be we're not, I don't know that we'll be ready for the review, but we will prioritize trying to get it there. But I want to do our due diligence and our homework and be prepared for you with that solicitation. And then just we'll bring it and we'll just tell you, tear it apart. Let's make it better.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to bring back our timeline for you all. If we're set to proceed.
Is it all right if I jump in here? I asked Layla and Lisa to work on this timeline because your time is also valuable, and I just felt like maybe it'll be helpful if we can kind of get a graph here so it helps you to be informed about where you want to really participate and put your efforts in and kind of what the overall commitment is. So that's the whole point of this, and maybe Layla already explained that.
Good to have the additional context. We did talk about the kickoff meeting. So this is kind of where we are now, the group charter, and talking about application review, the first 4 months of meeting, the first 4 meetings. Then we started talking about the solicitation. So the next couple months, this is where we will be including you all. Like LaDonna mentioned, we have drafted a solicitation. It still needs to be edited and tweaked a bit, but we will bring that to this group where we want to hear from you and we want to work on the solicitation together before we put it out to the public. I also mentioned we'll be doing a technical assistance session. So I explained to the group, LaDonna, that we'll be supporting answering questions for the general public and making sure people can fill out the application. When they have questions, we want to make sure we're answering that question for everybody. So
That is, yeah, I can say a little bit more about that. That has just been our practice with all of our solicitations, is that we offer supportive webinars, just trying to meet the orgs where they are and helping organizations and just being that tech support for completing the applications. And I think particularly with this one, it's really important given the uniqueness around that 35% and kind of just this one's unique in that way. So I really want us to be available. We would probably offer, I would say 2, maybe 3, and we'll try to broadcast that broadly for anyone who's interested.
Next is the scoring and awarding piece. We're going to estimate this is down the road several months, maybe May, June, July, scoring with the advisory group. So again, we'll be getting the applications back and we're going to bring them back to this group to help with the scoring or making recommendations. We'll be giving out the conditional award and grant agreement distribution, payment validation and distribution. So that's going to be from the OHA side. We're going to be the ones that will be handling the contracts with the organizations and making sure the money, the funding is going out appropriately. And at that point, that's where the advisory group will have fulfilled the duties once we kind of spend the pot of money. But the work will go on here at OHA. The behavioral health investments We'll be maintaining the compliance. So we'll be getting back quarterly reports as well as monthly reimbursement. Well, I've got someone in the waiting room.
And in terms of invoicing, we haven't determined exactly what that will look like. With the ARPA funding, we were required to do the invoicing. It's part of the requirement of ARPA funding. We can design what that's going to look like here, especially given that it is a percentage of the overall funding.
Hi, Jamaica. Thanks for joining us. And then ongoing program support. So that's what OHA additionally will be working on, making sure the funds are going out, reporting is coming back to us. But that is overall the timeline that we're aiming for. Any questions so far? Awesome. Checking the chat. Okay. Next, we wanted to talk about the group charter. I hope people got a chance to review the charter that we sent out via email. We were hoping to draft a charter as sort of an agreement between all of us. We all want to make sure we're adhering to the same rules as we're working together, making sure we know our purpose of the advisory group, why we're coming together, why it's important that we show up, because we're all working together to collaborate. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Can you all see the document currently? Okay.
And we were intentional about trying to not make it too cumbersome. So hopefully it's just a streamlined document to help us just ensuring we're all clear on our roles and responsibilities associated with this advisory group.
So the purpose, we talked a little bit about what we're doing in the last PowerPoint slide. The advisory group will convene to make recommendations for financing the development of community-based mental health housing to serve individuals with a variety of behavioral health needs. This work also includes policy development, soliciting funding proposals, processing applications for funding, and making recommendations for funding awards. The Behavioral Health Investments Team within the Oregon Health Authority administers the grant agreements that will provide capital development, startup funding for the creation of these housing projects for persons experiencing behavioral health challenges. And the authority was given to the advisory group and behavioral health investments via the House Bill 2316. So just a summary of that. Let me double check the chat. Okay. The charter outlines our members and key staff. Please let me know if I spelled your name wrong. I think I have everything corrected. And also a unique part of this advisory group is the representation that we included. So this group is representing positions of all these y'all can see the members. I think it's a really, really wonderful group of people. We have a lot of different lenses and perspectives. So it's exciting to be part of this group with you. And we value your time. Thank you for volunteering your time for being here. I know we've been sending emails asking you to read, and we will continue to send those applications to have you read and participate. Thank you. Acknowledge the time and energy that it takes to be part of something like this. So the scope of the advisory group plays a crucial role in the process by reviewing and evaluating applications from housing community organizations and providing recommendations on which organizations should receive funding. I am seeing a question in the chat. I think it's more accurate to say in the charter for financing the development of community-based housing to serve individuals with a variety of basic health needs. Aha. Was that in the upper portion there, Megan?
Yeah, I mean, that's the language you use in other parts of this, and if we call out mental health and don't include substance use, then I think we're missing part of our target population. So this way it encompasses all of it. But I mean, I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes here. So if there's a reason why it's worded that way, I'd like to hear that.
This is the sentence, right, for finance?
Yeah. Yeah.
It may be partly because of the issue that I was raising earlier. There might be a lot of support for substance use related communities and not enough support for behavioral health related issues. And so the priority would be on behavioral health community. And it just that worded in that way because of that potentially might explain for it. But of course, we know that there's co-occurring disorders and all that, so it's hard to
Well,
have
there
one
are,
without the other. Yeah.
but there are also folks that are not co-occurring, so we want to try to cast the widest net, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Are you thinking, Megan, to community-based mental health housing to serve individuals with a variety of behavioral health and substance use disorder needs?
Well, I see substance use disorder as falling under behavioral health
Under
along
behavioral.
with mental health,
Okay.
but I'm kind of old school, so if there's a better way to phrase it, I'd be happy to hear that too.
I tend to agree that it falls under behavioral health needs, but open to discussion. John, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
I point something out.
Mm-hmm.
If you are welcoming discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
In the communities of lived experience, which I represent, aka peers, there's a vast difference in culture and polarization in the mental health as opposed to the substance use communities. So from the perspective of looking from the outside in, it all looks like the same thing. But the needs and the factors, the challenges, the culture of these communities is vastly different. So I hope that we can have some awareness and sensitivity to that. The needs would not be entirely exactly the same, and tailoring projects for each community is really important, actually. The behavioral health side, the mental health side of the behavioral health community has been neglected for a very long time. The addiction side, substance use, has gotten a lot of attention, and actually the substance use addictions side of things, SUD, has really taken over the peer and lived experience communities in terms of who's getting priorities to get support. So I just want to represent that voice of need of lived experience communities that are just been underserved. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And I also am a person with lived experience on the substance use side. So I feel like they both need to be addressed. And if it makes more sense to call out both and take out behavioral health, I'm good with that too. They both need lots of attention. So
I'm sorry, I'm trying to.
Thank you. Yeah, very valuable conversation. Thanks.
I'm not sure how to raise my hand, but if I can just say that I think this dialogue is very important because one of the decisions, the behavioral health housing, there's licensing. And so we have to ensure that they would be licensed, and we would want to present the solicitation in that way as well, if that's the direction, the recommendations of this group.
Good morning, everyone. This is Jamaica. Good to see everyone. And sorry that I'm late as we crises left and right, but I want to ensure the equity piece is in there, marginalized populations. As a small culturally specific agency, oftentimes it's the one size fit all cookie cutter that just doesn't fit. and people began to continue to fall through the cracks of the system. So our work over here at Holistic Healing Behavioral Healthcare is very intentional. And my hope is that we are intentional as it relates to the funding, so we can help the people that aren't being helped by being forced to go to the larger dominant culture agencies.
I guess also something that one of the things that we run into not infrequently when we're looking at things that either say behavioral health or co-occurring disorders is there's really no definition of the acuity level that folks can manage. And I think we need to be very uh, very intentional about that, because we end up as a system, and I'll just kind of speak to Multnomah County. We basically are saying we have X amount of treatment or housing resources that can handle co-occurring disorders. But then when you talk to the providers, they're like, well, we can only handle like a certain acuity level. So if we're talking about this, I think we need to be really clear, like what the acuity level of the behavioral health needs that we're trying to serve here are, particularly if we're talking about co-occurring disorders, because oftentimes you'll get things where it's like folks will be able to treat like an anxiety disorder or a depressive disorder, but they're not able to manage mood disorders or folks with psychotic features. So that whole realm of services that looks like, and housing that looks like it's on the board, is actually not on the board for folks who have acute mental health needs. So I think just being very clear about what population and what needs the population may have, because I think this blanket term that we use in policy and kind of across the system about co-occurring disorder doesn't serve us well. It makes it look like we have more resources than we actually do for specific, particularly for populations that have extremely high needs.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate that, but all needs need to be attended to on all levels. Co-occurring, if it's just anxiety or depressive disorders, in addition to substance use disorders, just like, for instance, we're not equipped to do SPMI, severe and persistent mental illnesses, and Unity continues to send them, which was my issue this morning. But again, every level is important to be funded, so again, no one falls through the cracks.
Here, here.
Are we thinking we want to specifically outline substance use disorder in the objective?
Well, I think as long as if it does go into co-occurring, then being really clear as to what that is, because there's a lot of providers that are like, we do co-occurring, but it's like, but they're not me. But what I would not want to do is basically put this out and have providers say, yes, I can do co-occurring, but it's actually not meeting the needs of folks who may. And I guess being clear on what our target, because behavioral health is a huge, like it's a huge umbrella, and so being clear is like this housing are the resources, who are we doing the resources for, or what is the focus population? Is it folks with acute SPMI needs, or is it folks for like what is the because there is a limited amount of money, so what is it, like what population are we actually trying to serve with this money?
I mean, the advisory group required membership representation of private provider of mental health, private provider of substance use treatment, and groups that advocate, and consumers. of both types of services. So my understanding, and I could be wrong, so let me know if I am, was that we're looking at both, or mental health, substance use, and co-occurring. Is that right?
I think that would be most helpful because again, some of us don't serve the SPMI and the higher needs people. And so if we focus the funding on that, guess who continue to get it? The larger dominant culture agencies.
Okay.
Figured out how to raise my hand. I'm really happy I learned that this morning. Um, I think Jamaica, nice to see you. We've spoken several times, but I've never actually seen you before, so this is great. I think part of I think we need to step back and really look at that Res Plus study, and hopefully that can guide kind of what our priorities are going to be here. So I don't know if you heard that part of the conversation before, Jamaica.
Do we have a timeline and when the results of that study are going to be available? Because that'll help guide our process, I feel.
Well, we're going to send it right after this meeting. We'll send you the finalized report.
Oh, the residential study's been completed? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Fabulous. Thanks.
I saw what you put in the chat, Chris, about like identifying the funding and sort of referencing the ORS rules versus the House bill. So I'm trying to think of a way to put that in.
Yeah, I just look at that as, I mean, that's the whole purpose of this, is there's an incentive fund into which the legislature deposited money, and then the advisory body was directed to solely relate to that fund through as outlined in statute. So it seemed like that would be a good source material.
We're so glad you're here, Chris.
Yeah, thanks. Forgive me for interjecting so much, but this is really important to NAMI. We've spent a lot of years getting money for this stuff and getting it, renewed every couple biennia.
I think I'm going to think of a more eloquent way to say this. Advisory.
Chris, this is Luke. I was wondering if we could catch up outside the meeting for another discussion and exploration. Are you connected with Tammy Paul frequently?
Tammy's at OFSN, right?
Yeah, Tammy's OFSN.
Yeah, I haven't connected with her yet, but it looks like you're on the phone. I don't know if somebody could send Luke my email address.
Oh, I have it actually.
Oh,
We
yeah,
just
shoot me
haven't.
an email, Luke.
Yeah, we haven't connected for a while.
Yeah, it
I'll
has been
follow
a
up
long
about
time.
the conversation she and I have been having that might help us in this council too.
Yeah, feel
All right,
free to
thanks.
email him.
Great.
Lisa, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I just want to clarify. I think at the beginning we discussed having side conversations would be a disadvantage to the whole group because we want to move within the group. Do you guys remember anything like that?
I think when we're addressing this work, it's definitely best to work through OHA. Like people have questions about drafting, and questions specifically about the solicitation, the House bill. We, yeah, definitely want to work together as a group.
I'd love to bring this to the attention of the whole group. I just don't know if now's the time, and I appreciate everybody's valuable time. Would you like to hear
Right.
more about it right now?
Is it
It's
relevant to this work or is it outside of the
It's
work?
relevant. It's relevant. We're waiting for the residential study, but it's relevant to the work. Back when we had the Peer Fusion meeting, which the Office of Recovery and Resilience organized, this is an OHA project. The communities of providers and peer support, addiction services around the state gathered for the Peer Fusion quarterly. Actually, it's every 6 months biannual meeting, and there was a subject of pretty intense dispute there. Recovery is not a word that unites the whole peer community, and the family support arm of the peer community was objecting to identifying with that word recovery, and we were able to grasp this immense situation that's occurring where we need a larger context to unite us all. And I think we came to this really solid discovery that wellness and resilience is that larger umbrella. So what I've been talking with Tammy and others about on the sidelines is how to serve this larger community of need. And if we can have this like wellness oriented paradigm of care that addresses the families that need support and the service users that need support and the houseless population, so that there's a continuum of care all throughout and warm handoffs and stuff like that, and nobody feels left out. I think that we could really bring this forward. So the Family Support Network, I think, is critical to this conversation, and that NAMI has taken the lead and set this opportunity up is wonderful. But how can we bring our system and our communities forward into a new paradigm of resilience and community wellness is what the conversation I want to have. So I hope that people feel more included in what that is about. If we all want to have that conversation together, that's wonderful. Just didn't want to waste your time. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think it's good context for us to have, especially folks that are maybe newer and haven't had or been included in conversations like or had that context before. So thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, what's happening is, see, in my lived experience also, my family didn't want to keep me during a time of crisis or like houselessness and stuff like that. They didn't want to let me, stay at the house, or my friends, felt like I was a burden. So the only place there is these mega institutions. And then the family members trust that the mega institutions are going to care for their loved ones the way that they would want to they would themselves, but it doesn't actually happen. People go to the institutions and they're failed, they're abused, they're traumatized, and then the loved ones, the family members go, well, I really feel bad about my decision to trust these mega institutions with the care of my loved ones. So we need more options. And the conversation I've been having with NAMI and family support is like, well, what if we had programs that were designed and there's peers involved that have been through these experiences themselves and know the kind of care we need? They don't exist yet. But we can make them happen.
You'll see in the Res Plus study, they do touch on that there is a lack of step down services too. So I think in speaking to the whole continuum of care, that's a really valid point.
Great. Thanks.
That was a very good point. Is it possible that some of these fundeds could be targeted toward like a respite care, like transitional home, where when family members do oftentimes ostracize the person experiencing addiction because of the trauma that it brings onto the whole family and the stress, et cetera, that there's a safe place where these individuals can go in addition to the treatment services that they're receiving to actually live and be able to have that peer support and extra care and love and attentiveness that they need to recover.
I'm going to defer to you, Chris, if that's okay on that question.
I mean, conceivably, yes, money could be allocated to this, right? So you could have supportive and supported housing projects that are peer-led. We do have peer crisis respite in the state. the crisis respite is something that funds could be eligible for. The challenge is we only have $20 million and we can't do everything. So one of the toughest tasks is going to be taking that 20 million and determining what it's going to fund and then creating application processes for that. The long term, if we're successful, and the last time we were successful, we leveraged the 20 million we got into, I don't know, like it was 150 million in market value housing just for people either with SMI or SUD. The legislature sees that and said, I'll give you another 20 million. So the opportunity is there to get funding. And over time, as an advisory body, if we advise OHA saying, hey, set aside X number of dollars to do this, and the agency agrees, we could have a funding source for some of these things. That we built in that big tent in this fund, but we also have to keep in mind there's dollars are finite. And there is, I mean, for better or worse, we do have a study out and the governor has made a priority budgetarily to do that. And we have a number of projects out there that, I think this is a factor that are just short of their funding goals and with a little additional funding could come online. But that's, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Luke. It just always comes back to there's just not enough money, period. But it seems to me if we're successful with this 20 million, we could do that.
There's not enough to go around to everything, but we need to identify the gaps, and there's deficiency here.
I think
there
that's
really is.
I think that's fair, but let's spend this 20 million and then go make the case as an advisory body. Give us 20 million more, and then we could advise OHA. Can you set aside X number of dollars to do this type of housing?
This is not the only effort. It leads to other opportunities and onward and upward.
I don't know if you are following the session right now and the bills that have been dropped. I'm assuming many of you are. But there is a bill, it's House Bill 3146 that I particularly feel excited about because it would require OHA to ensure that there were no less than 4 and no more than 8 emergency housing facilities for people who are on the wait list for SUD services. I just think that's such an important resource. So I'm really excited about it.
Could you repeat that bill number, please?
It's House Bill 3146. Let me be 100% sure. There's so many bill numbers floating in our heads right now. I'm looking. Yes, it is. It's a unified bill analysis. It's House Bill 3146.
And we are just coming up on at the end of time here. I want to be conscious that we're being respectful of everyone's time, not, that we're using the time that we said we were going to take. Just at the end of the charter here, these were some of the commitments that we addressed in the very beginning. It was meeting number 1. I asked all of you to help us come up with the agreements that we wanted to adhere to for this group. I know a big one was valuing peers with lived experience as a sounding board, being mindful and informing the group when we can't attend, maintaining a space free of discrimination, harassment, erosion of group morale, being respectful, communicating in a respectful manner. And then the last little bit is just that we'll be having these meetings via Zoom. So we're coming from all different parts of the state and we want to be the most inclusive and accessible. So we'll continue to send out meeting information via email, and we'll be meeting on Zoom again. So I really appreciate everyone's time with us today. We had some really wonderful dialogue, and we'll be sending out some emails that will contain some additional information to include your participation.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
So, Layla, are we not going to cover conflict of interest?
We'll send an email out.
Oh, yeah, I've been waiting for that subject.